What's going on, guys? What's the Deal Sports? Zach Deal back here with another episode on Colder Than Canvas. Today, we got a special guest, a guy that's high up there with Cage Fury fighting championships, a guy behind the scenes that kind of does a lot of the work that you guys don't see brought to TV, but a part of the element that makes the entire production. We got Jason. How we doing, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate what you do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. I know you have your own podcast, Controlled Chaos. Give you a little shout out on there. How's the podcast doing?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like I was saying, that it's about letting people understand the relationships I've built in the business and get to see a side of people that they don't normally get to see and understand. A lot of people, when they get a UFC fighter or a legendary coach on, they just want to talk to them about fights and stuff like that, where I kind of just tell you about the person and let the person really tell you where they came from, how they got there, and try to kind of give you a roadmap if it was ever something you were interested in. And knowing that, Greg Jackson didn't start his first coaching job in the UFC. Greg Jackson started doing something 30 years ago and built himself up. And that's the part I think a lot of people just don't get, is how much work goes on before you see these guys in the big stage.
Oh, for sure. And some of the families that passed the baton around as well. And it, started off with this OG and then now, the Gracie family is the perfect example, especially in the backyard of like Philadelphia and everything. But that's a perfect example that you push right there, or narrative that you push, is just that the MMA guys are normal people as well. And the sport wasn't even developed enough for them to have this crazy history that dates all the way back. It really started early on in like the late 90s and like the early 2000s.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, this is a company, UFC is a company that 20 years ago was almost bankrupt and
Yeah.
almost couldn't go on. They were 25-30 million dollars into debt. And a few years ago they got sold for $4 billion and just signed a $7.7 billion TV rights deal. So I think it is the fastest growing sport in the world right now in terms of revenue and attendance and viewerships and events. And not that long ago, we almost didn't have this anymore. So
Yeah.
it's gone really far. And that's with, really good leadership and really good regional scene. And obviously the UFC putting a lot of money behind what they do. And, it's given me an opportunity to do what I do now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a good example too, because for me growing up, I'm 29 years old now, just turned 29 in April. If you told me Spike TV would, be the TV channel that would air UFC, I'd be completely on board with that. I would think that's the pinnacle, or maybe MTV, you know what I mean? One of those type of channels. And MMA really didn't take off until the streaming era really got going. And that was pretty much, I didn't watch MMA even really during like prime Conor McGregor. I started watching like ESPN, streaming-esque like 2019, 2020, and also with the help of the UFC Fight Pass. So where a lot of eyes are drawn via sports through just TV channels, I think the streaming era really helped push MMA forward and get it back on the conveyor belt that it needed to be on.
Well, and the number of events that are held now too,
Yeah.
20 years ago, you wouldn't have very many events because the talent pool wasn't that deep. You just didn't have the athletes to be able to have 48 shows in a year with 10 to 12 fights on it. Now you have the athletes because of a developed regional scene and because of just more people wanting to get into it and more depth per weight class, that you can do a lot of events and bring in those viewership numbers, because you're putting so many events on. You're doing them in different countries. You have fighters that aren't just, used to be America versus Brazil. That was really all you had. I mean, we've had Australian champions, Nigerian champions, English champions, we've Mexican champions, American champions, Canadian champions. We've had champions from all over the world now, which only emphasizes and increases the viewership numbers.
For sure. And I felt like also too, it was kind of reserved to the stylistic, where it was like Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy versus like a striker. And that was kind of what the early stages of UFC, which is the pinnacle of fighting, was. And then you had also the One Championship, which had its run with some of the biggest names that came over and flip-flopped. And then we had the famous trade beat with Demetrius Johnson and
Ben Askren.
So there's been a lot of stuff like that going on, but it's just really good to see that a lot of people complain that the UFC isn't exactly what it used to be. But I also think the talent pool is kind of, recycling itself a little bit, and we're just trying to figure out who the today's stars are still and tomorrow's stars, as opposed to having, you know, the Conor McGregors, Dustin Poiriers, and all those guys at the top. And now we realize that Max, Volk, and all these guys are about to retire, and who's going to really, you know, take the hand off and be the next star. Who do you think, with that description, are some of the guys, not even just in the UFC, but just in general in the MMA community, kind of fit that billing?
Man, there is so much talent now, and I see it at our level, where I think we have people that are sometimes making their pro debut or only have a couple fights that I'm like, man, they're going to be UFC champions. They're going to be ready. I mean, we've developed guys like Marab and Aljamain Sterling. We've gotten those guys to UFC. You know, funny thing is like on CFFC, Marab, he's 0-2. He's lost in MMA and he's lost in BJJ, and the guy's, you know, a UFC champion and one of the best fighters pound for pound on the planet, because that shows how tough that.
I think one of those losses is to my guy Kevin Dantzler too, from Web Fitness MMA. So Kevin
Dantzler beat him and Aljo on our jiu-jitsu event. So it goes to show you how tough our events are. So there's so many guys, you know, it would take forever to go through all these guys' names, but there's so much talent, and we have to have this many events. We have to have this many fights because we have to give these guys opportunities to fight. You're lucky. You know, the UFC is going to try to offer you 3 fights a year. It's difficult to fight 3 times a year without getting injured, without something happening, without getting an extended layoff. Because at the UFC, these guys are definitely coming out of a fight with some time off that they need to take to heal, to rest, surgery, whatever it is. You could have an 8-week period where you can't even have contact, and then you've got to go back into a camp. You've got to cut weight. You've got to train. You've got to hope you don't get hurt while training. So
we see guys even like Johnny Walker and Terrence McKinney get hurt celebrating after, and then you got the famous Justin backflip off the cage that he's going to do, and Michael Chandler doing 5 backflips after he just kicked somebody in the head with his shins. You know what I mean? These guys are just reckless, and you can't really take that away from them. Another perfect example to build off of what you just said was Hamzat fought what? Twice in 13 days on Fight Island, and then how long did it take for us to see him again?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, look, took us 5 years to see Conor come back, right? And that
Kevin
lasted,
Holland 5 fights in 1 year, and then Kevin Holland hasn't really been exactly the same guy. Where we think Kevin Holland, I mean, he fights in a bunch, but at the end of the day, he has talent to be in the top 7 or 8 of the division if he actually picks one division to be in.
Well, and Kevin Holland, too, is a guy that will literally fight anybody at any time, any short notice. He's done our BJJ events. That guy just wants to fight, wants to compete. And that's why the UFC will keep a guy like that around forever, because when you know, we deal with on our matchmaking side where, you know, we have somebody tough or a fight falls out. People are like, I'm not fighting that guy short notice. I'm not fighting that guy. I don't want to fight that guy. Where Kevin Holland, they can send him a text message and say, hey, Kevin, can you fight next week? He doesn't ask, who am I fighting? What weight am I fighting? What's my purse? He just says, yes. And then that's it. Where do I need to go? Who do I send my medicals to? And guys like that are so valuable to the sport because they literally save events for us all the time.
Yeah. And they always say that you kind of, you pay it forward like that and you get it back in return. And then, you know, we've seen guys like Renato Moicano get a championship title fight on short notice out of nowhere because of situations like that. You never know what's going to happen. And that also, with that being said, then we were taken away from Arman versus Islam, and we still haven't seen that fight. So that just epitomizes how crazy this.
Arman did it to himself, right? Missing weight. So that's a problem on his own. Where Hanato, he was doing commentary for CFFC and he stayed on the radar. And, you know, I think that helped him get in there. He's a great guy. And again, he took a fight that I guarantee other people got calls for too, and were offered that fight. And they said no. They were like, I'm not fighting this guy on short notice. I don't care what it is. The money's not worth it because I don't want the loss. Where Hanato said, I believe in myself and I'm going to fight and I'm going to do it. And he did it. He went out there and he did it. And Kevin Holland's another good example of a guy that does that. He doesn't care who it is. He fought Hamzat on 1 day's notice. He was not supposed to fight him.
Oh, that was the what? That was Hamzat, the Tony Ferguson?
Yeah, Hamzat missed weight. And so they rearranged the whole thing, and Ferguson ended up fighting Diaz, and Kevin Holland went up and fought Hamzat. So, and he did make weight for Kevin Holland did make welterweight, I believe, for that show, because that's what he was supposed to be fighting at. So he went up a weight class to fight such a dangerous guy. And don't think that the matchmakers and the UFC brass doesn't appreciate and recognize that when contract negotiations come back in, or other fights come back in, or purses come in. They remember that stuff.
Oh, for sure. And that might get you some extra fights on the fight contract itself to give you security to be able to take chances and risks out there. And it kind of sucks on the flip side. One of my favorite fighters who hasn't really had the same success that he had outside of the UFC, even though everybody recognizes him as one of the best talents in MMA, is MVP. And he's kind of somebody that's stuck in flux right now. But I also believe that it's not just his job to dictate how the fight goes. And if you're going to allow MVP to dictate point style fighting, then that's the type of fight that you're going to lose to MVP in.
Yeah, and MVP came in, and he's actually had another really good run, even for his age. I think he's around 40 years old. And, the thing with an MMA career is the window is short.
Yeah.
You've got to get as many fights and make as much money as you can in a short window. There's guys that last two fights in the UFC and their career is over. They didn't even last a year and they're getting cut. Where there's guys like Clay Guida, Jim Miller that are in there for 20 years.
Yeah.
But even 20 years, most people don't have a job for 20 years and retire. They've got to work 30, 40, 50 years before they can actually retire from a job. And so you have a short window to be successful and do as much as you can in the sport.
For sure. And that window can, to me, a perfect example is like Max has to fight Conor at 21 years old. And then he gets knocked out by like the hottest commodity on the block for the first time he ever gets rocked. And for most people, that span of time, that's like 13 or 14 years in the game for Ilya to get him and knock him out like that. And then he just beats Conor McGregor and he face plants Justin Gaethje, who's now the middleweight champ. And that's just, when you add up the MMA math, there's always just
that just shows you how that math just doesn't work.
There is no math. It's just like it's the Big Bang Theory. You know what I mean? It's just all over here. Lasers all in different directions.
Styles definitely make matchups, and again, there's a lot of things that come into it, even with wrestling, where you may have a guy that's a superior wrestler to another guy, but maybe this guy did have a really bad weight cut that week, or was sick or something like that, and maybe is nursing an injury that he doesn't normally have, and they lose. And it's not indicative that this guy's not better than this guy. It's just on that day, you didn't win. That's really all it is. And I think there's a lot of guys that have lost that if we fought 10 times, that might have been their only one win out of the 10, but they got the win when it mattered.
Yeah, it's all about peaking at the right time. And if you peak at the exact time that you need to, which is literally right before the fight and going into that cage, that's where all your energy is pushed and reserved for, and then you're able to perform. I mean, that's exactly what it's all about. We've seen guys weight cut, and you also mentioned how that 4-person screw up between Ferguson, Diaz, and how that all played out with Holland and Hamzat. How many guys are willing to save a card to benefit a guy, which Holland benefited Hamzat, keeping him on the card to be able to do that and still be professional enough to make the weight. So
don't get me wrong. I'm sure Kevin was compensated properly for it.
Yeah.
But again, there was a lot of other guys that probably would have been compensated properly for it, but didn't do it. Now, doing something on 24 hours notice after weigh-ins, that's very difficult to do because a lot of athletic commissions won't even allow it. They'll say, no, we're not approving it. But, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, I was actually at that fight live. We were in Nevada, in Vegas, meeting with UFC brass about some stuff that was going on. They invited us to the show to come out and watch. So I got to be there for it. And Jeff Mullen, who is the executive director of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, he's from here in Memphis, where I live. He was just inducted into the Tennessee Martial Arts Hall of Fame, which I'm the president of. And, he's smart enough to understand how the business goes and how to work. And, they do things there that make sense. And that's really why Las Vegas is the fight capital of the world.
100%. And that's why the Apex is obviously located there. I remember one other, before we get into your career, a little bit crazy circumstance where a guy did not have to show up and fight and still put on one of the most ridiculous performances I've ever seen. I never thought Justin Gaethje was going to get dropped by a straight right hand. And that's what Charles Oliveira did when he couldn't cut weight anymore. And the belt wasn't even on the line that he had to vacate before that 155 title fight a couple years back. And I just remember all the controversy leading up and just following all the news that was breaking out about how he couldn't win the belt, but Justin could win the belt. Justin was kind of up in flux about whether he wanted to actually fight. And Charles could easily said, nah, I'm not fighting. And then we get the craziest 3.5 minutes of a first round in a title fight for 155 in the most, prized weight division that there is, that, in my opinion, that we've ever seen. That was one of the most chaotic title fights leading up to the day of that I've ever seen, especially for the craziest weight class that there is in the UFC. But as for you, how did you even get involved with MMA? I would assume, I don't know exactly how old you are, in your mid 30s to mid 40s ish.
I'm 45 years old.
You look pretty young and pretty good, if you ask me. So that's why I could, so I just hit on the teeter of the seesaw. So, like we talked about the sport not being as developed, even for guys like, Joe Rogan and Dana White, they were through, the entire rigor mortis of all the different stuff that has happened in the sport to lead up to these title fights of Conor versus Max on International Fight Week, UFC 329, which is crazy. We're in the 300s with it. But how did you get involved with MMA?
Just imagine what we'd be at if we counted all the fight nights and all the other events. We're well over 1,000. In CFFC, we just did show 157. And that's just MMA shows, not even our next gen series, not our pro grappling, not our college wrestling. So I started wrestling in high school, Long Beach, California, at 14 years old. And, I had a pretty good career. I was wrestling in college a little bit at Golden West College, the same junior college that Tito Ortiz went to. And I ended up joining the Army after 9/11. September 11th happened, and I decided, this is probably a little more important to do.
Yeah,
and I went,
service, by the way.
it was great times. And I ended up wrestling for the Army when I was in Europe. And I won the All Armed Forces Championships in both styles, freestyle, Greco. And the thing that would have let me try out for the All Army team, but we ended up getting stop lost and sent to Iraq, and it ended my competitive career at that point. So I thought. So after getting out of the Army, I moved to Memphis, and I was volunteering at a high school coaching wrestling, so I could, be involved and help out and use a skill that I felt that I had. And I got free tickets for a show. It was called V3 Fights, a promotion here in Memphis. And really one of the strongest, if not biggest, regional promotions in the Southwest. It was created and owned by a guy named Nick Harmeyer, who's still one of my best friends. He helped legalize MMA in Tennessee. He also got his promoter license in Mississippi and Alabama, and just did a lot of work for it. And I went to a show. I got free tickets, like I said, from an organization called VetTix. And I saw the matchmaker was a guy I knew from wrestling. He was a wrestling coach at another school. And I said, hey, man, I'd love to compete again. I think I was 33, 34 at the time. And I was like, I'd love to compete again. And I got on the card, and I outsold everybody on the card, probably combined. I raised a bunch of money for a charity. I had a huge social media presence. The fight didn't go my way, the first one, but it is what it is. I might not be here if it did. And afterwards, I'd asked the owner, I said, hey, I noticed you don't really do a lot with social media. There's not a lot of info going out. Why don't I take that over for you? He said, absolutely. It's yours. Here's an email address. Here's access. You're on. So the next show I showed up to was in April at one of the casinos, and I was just there to kind of do social media stuff. Well, a guy that he had working for him as a color commentator, post-fight interviewer, they had a falling out, and he didn't show up. And they said, hey, would you want to do the post-fight interviews? I said, absolutely, I'll do it. So I went in, I did the post-fight interviews, and the referee at the time came up to me. He said, hey, man, who did you do this for before? I said, bro, this is my first time ever doing it. He's like, wow, you're probably the best I've ever seen do this. And so then I got hired on to start working on the broadcast team as the analyst for pay-per-view shows. Got to work with a guy named Greg Gaston, who was a Emmy Award-winning broadcaster here out of Memphis, does a lot of football, basketball, a lot of college and pro sports around here. And then I became the director of operations for V3. We became part of what's called Alliance MMA. So then I got to start working with bigger organizations like CFFC and all kinds of things like that, and do some traveling. So it's pretty cool because V3, we would do, 6 shows a year, 2 in the casinos, 4 in Memphis. So it wasn't a horribly, demanding schedule. And it was also in Memphis where I live. So there was no flights or travel or hotel for me. It was pretty simple. Well, then COVID happened, and it was actually funny. I fought 2 more times after that. And I fought just
after
shy
COVID?
After my first fight, I ended up fighting 2 more times. So I fought on the very last V3 fights card. It was on February 29th, 2020. And COVID had just started happening. I was just shy of 39 years old. I win. And I had to work too, you know, because it was my show. So I'm working the show too and fighting, which most people don't have to do. Then I competed in a jiu-jitsu tournament the next weekend. And then the next week, the world shut down and canceled everything. Well, CFFC, they were primarily and really only at the time, they were doing shows in Atlantic City, New Jersey at the Hard Rock and in Philadelphia. And athletic commissions out there, New Jersey was like, nah, we're not doing anything. No shows. We're shut down. And PA was like, we don't know. And even if we do shows, we don't even know if we're going to allow people there. We don't know what's going to happen right now. Well, the UFC is like, guys, you've got to keep doing shows because without you, we don't have the talent to come into the UFC. You know, nobody starts in the UFC 2-0. Guys get in the UFC when they're 12-2, 13-1. That's how you get.
You got to be Gable Stevenson if you want an opportunity like that. You know,
you only get those opportunities by fighting for us. That's how you get those fights. So Nick Hardmeyer sat down with Rob Hadak and we're like, hey, why don't we just merge? Because we can still do shows in Mississippi. So we can use our casino deal out there and we can get shows done. Also, why don't we try to get into Florida now? Why don't we own the Southeast region? And Florida was like, we're open. You can do shows. So we got a Hard Rock deal out there as well. We started doing Tampa, Florida. And then it's just blossomed and blossomed and blossomed, where I just kind of started. I worked a show one time for him as an announcer. And then it was like, hey, can you come out and help and help and help? And now I'm an executive on the team as the COO. You know, like I said, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we do that I have to do. And we have some really good personnel like, you know, John Morgan. Everybody in the MMA space knows who John Morgan is. He's the guy that asked Dana the first question at every press conference. He's a extremely well-established journalist that knows everybody in the sport. You know, Rob Hadak, Brad Bolton, you know, we're there and we've got some really cool people that have worked for us. You know, we have CM Punk that does commentary for us, you know, Michael Chiesa, Dean Thomas, Michelle Watterson, you know, Chase Hooper, Paul Felder. I mean, we have all these guys, that are working for us and working our events. I mean, we just had our show in Atlantic City. We had meet and greets with Sean Brady, with Eddie Alvarez. Eddie and Sean were there to corner guys, you know, then they did fan meet and greets for us. So like we have guys that are at our shows just to be a part of our shows. You see a lot of promotions. They're paying these guys a bunch of money just to come hang out at the show. No, these guys are coming to our show working, you know, because they're there to corner these guys. You see them out of Webb's gym, out of Marquez's gym. There's just killers in this region. And that's why I think our success in this area, in the Philadelphia, Atlantic City area is skyrocketed because we could draw so much talent locally, you know, from Philly, from New Jersey, from Delaware, from Maryland, from New York, and all that talent. And, you know, we were talking about, you know, guys being successful that can sell a lot of tickets and bring a lot of people. We don't really need that. 80 to 85% of the people that come to our show are not affiliated necessarily with a specific fighter. They didn't say, hey, I'm coming to see Jason. I'm buying a ticket for him. No, they're just like, we're here to see CFFC because the venues are nice. The shows are cool. There's always UFC guys here. The production is through the roof. I've never seen a show like this. I don't know if you've been to a live MMA show regionally, but, you know, it says starts at 7 o'clock and 8:02, the first fight is walking out, and you're sitting there for an hour and a half. Like, what the hell is going on? When we say it starts at 7 o'clock, it starts at 7 o'clock because we have a live TV window that we have to meet, and we meet all those obligations. And we have a full production team where they literally space it out and plug it in to every second is accounted
the
for.
Entire thing out.
The whole thing. And I mean, I've even had to do stage manager the last 2 events. So I'm doing stage manager where I'm staging the guys. I'm walking them out. I'm getting them out. I'm calling the decision into the production truck so the camera guy knows who to look at when the winner is announced. You know, all those little things that we do, and I think we do as good, if not better, than really anybody else out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you talk about, you know, local talents clash with each other. We were talking about beforehand. Some of the people I know, like Kay Beardelli, the amateur champion, his only losses to one of the hottest names in that regard as well, and Joey Milano. You know what I mean? So it's just like we see the UFC White House card, and Bo Nickel, I think, is claimed Pennsylvania-wise because of Penn State, and he's got to fight a Philly dude in Kyle Dawkins who got himself back into the UFC. So it's kind of like everywhere you look, Islam, holds his camp usually in New Jersey when he comes back around into the States.
He's up at Dante Rivera. Yeah, he goes up to Dante Rivera.
I did an interview, a podcast. I think it was episode 4 or 5 of this with Bob Maloney, who does the Ring of Combat and the Art of War announcing. And I just cut the clip and I was like, asking him about some of the hottest names in the tri-state region. And I got dudes like Justin Rosario hit me up like, yo, let me hop on the podcast. And I'm like, all right, dude, hell yeah, I'll bring you on the podcast. And I'm like, whoa, Frankie Edgar protege, you know what I mean? Then I'm talking to Frankie's son. So it's like this whole little, dome that has been built, especially I feel like the connectiveness, like you talked about, really grew not only from connections and the eagerness of the sport and how you have to always stay ready, but also from what happened during COVID and seeing that we don't want to go back to that. And we want to just progress the sport forward as opposed to kind of getting it crinked up and kinkled in a way.
I mean, one of the things with us, it just happened to us a week ago where UFC knows who's on our cards. Yeah. And they know what's on Fight Pass. And we have a UFC clause in our contract that if the UFC calls you, I don't care if it's 10 minutes before you're supposed to fight. If the UFC calls you, you're released free from your contract. Yeah. And, we just had a guy that was signed to fight for us on July 14th. The UFC signed him. And what the UFC does is they know that if a guy is booked for us, he's training, he's ready, he's dieting, he's cutting weight. He's going to be physically and mentally ready for a fight. Yeah. So a lot of people say like, well, I don't want to take a fight because I'm close to Contender Series, or I think I'm close to getting signed to the UFC, where most promotions don't have a UFC clause in their contract. They're going to keep you because you sold tickets and they need you to keep those tickets sold. Where we're like, man, God bless you. What do you need from us? Do you need me to send your medicals to the Nevada State Athletic Commission so you can get cleared? What do you need from us? God bless you. Great, because it's so much more prideful for us to count the number of guys that we get to the next level than it is to say, well, we had a guy that got signed, but we didn't let him go and we kept him so he could fight on our card. And then he got signed afterwards. That's not us. And what's going to happen to those promotions is guys that are close don't want to fight for them anymore. Yeah. Because they're going to be like, well, if I get signed, they're not going to let me go. Where us, they know if they get signed, they're gone.
So you really treat it like the true ramp and takeoff for the next level. And that's, I feel like, draws more fighters to you guys because you really take care of them. And that's funny that you brought up the medical part of it, because I watched the Controlled Chaos episode with Eric Anders, and he was talking about all the behind the scenes stuff about having to get cleared for a fight with the medicals and the blood work and all that stuff and all the different questions that they ask you. So there's a lot more.
It's crazy. Every state
wanting you on spot and then being ready and actually being able to take the opportunity too. There's a lot that goes into it.
What drives me a little crazy is people think that it's UFC. UFC does not regulate MMA. State athletic commissions regulate MMA. Every state is different for what
that's
they
like
do.
New Jersey. What, they don't have the 12 to 6 elbows, so like how they got legalized or something. They kind of can't. And then amateur fighting, and there's no ground and pound and elbows and stuff, and the amateur scene on New Jersey.
Absolutely. So. And medicals themselves are different. The medical clearance for New Jersey is pretty wild. It's a physical by a DO or an MD, an EKG, a CT scan or MRI, an ophthalmologist eye exam, Hep B, Hep C, HIV, CBC, PT, PTT. All those things are required to be a professional athlete, professional fighter in New Jersey. You go to Pennsylvania, it's blood work, eye exam it could be an optometrist, and a physical. That's it. You can go to Mississippi, where it's just blood work less than a year old. Same thing in North Dakota. Florida can be an eye exam and a physical and blood work. Everybody's different. And everybody thinks, well, I'm licensed in this state. I don't care. You're not licensed in that state. Every state is its own jurisdiction, and they have their own licensing requirements and fees that you got to pay. We just did a show in Illinois. Illinois would not accept any physicals from any other state or any medicals from any other state. The medicals had to be on the Illinois form. Even if you got one from New Jersey, Nevada, California, which are some of the highest standard and strictest exams in the world for these medicals, the state of Illinois would not accept them. You would have to get it redone or transferred onto an Illinois form. So that's the thing that guys just don't understand when they tell me, oh, my medicals are good. Your medicals aren't good until you send them to me. I review them and I submit them to an athletic commission. An athletic commission accepts them. That's what guys don't get. Well, I got an eye exam from this state. Well, that was by an optometrist, and this state only accepts an ophthalmologist. So it's not good. You know, it's
It's
not
all
how.
about terminology too. And like you said, there's probably people as well, the fan perspective of the people that just pop in every so often. They don't have the luxury of living in, like me, I'm South Jersey, 12 minutes away from Philadelphia right now. So I could be right into an event for you guys at like Live Casino or whatever casino, whether it's you guys or Art of War, Ring of Combat, wherever, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, right around there, all the big spots. But some of those states like Illinois, like you're probably a fan of MMA in Chicago, and you're like, why are they never coming over here? Why are they never coming to this city? It's like there's the strictness and different stuff. It's cool that they operate in that sense and they're allowed to because they have the luxury of that. But also, that's some of the reasons why some of these cities don't get the type of action that they're looking for when it comes to mixed martial arts.
So there's a difference in some athletic commissions, like a New Jersey Athletic Commission and Illinois Athletic Commission. They're funded usually by a general fund, meaning the state gives them a budget to operate every year. So they're not necessarily worried about how much money they generate from an organization. Where Pennsylvania, Florida, stuff like that, their operating budget is based on how much money they bring in from ticket tax, permit fees, revenue, all that stuff. They're dependent on shows. So they try to be very friendly and accommodating to promotion, so the promotions want to come do shows there and make it easy. But a state like New Jersey, they have phenomenal venues. They have extremely professional and well-versed athletic commissions. And so there is a barrier to entry because it is expensive. One, fighter insurance alone is expensive. That can price most people out of a show, period, just having to buy fighter insurance with their limits that they have. The fees that we're paying for officials, the ticket tax fees. It's a lot of money that most promotions, they couldn't do. They wouldn't make that much money if they did 10 shows in a row to be able to pay it off. But in turn, we get amazing venues. Our shows, it's at the Hard Rock. I mean, that's the former Trump Taj Mahal. The UFC's done shows there. So we know that we can get it done. The licensing is extremely difficult. If I had to buy a separate laptop just for this podcast, because my other laptop is getting so full of forms and IDs and applications and all the stuff that's required to get these guys licensed. It is a pain, but it's part of what I do as a COO to make sure that all the stuff leading up to the fight gets done.
Yeah. And that part of the fight game, like if you hadn't explained that for the beginning of the podcast, that's probably like, oh, he's just a cool dude that, matches people up and he's got, the luxurious lifestyle, putting together all these fights. And like, that's maybe what, 6-7% of what's actually going on as into the whole.
Yeah. What's nice is I don't actually have to do any matchmaking. I'm there once the matchmakers do their thing. I give them the medical updates. I say, hey, this guy hasn't responded about his medicals. I've got to I book all the transportation, flights, hotels. I let them deal with it because if I had matchmaking too, I would have jumped off a building by now because it would just.
Especially because you would get intercepted with before that process of this guy can't do this because of that, this, that, the other, and then you're on the other side of it. So it's like,
and we, just last weekend we lost a main event on the scale. I'm getting texts at 7:30 in the morning from a fighter. Oh, I'm overweight. I'm not feeling good. I'm like, dude, I got enough stuff to deal with. You need to call your matchmakers and talk to them because if there's a way to save the fight, they'll do it. I'm not dealing with it. It's not my lane to step into. I don't know what the other coach wants to do,
and that kind of jeopardizes what you do too, because it might be like the comfortability of the relationship that you have with a person, but that's not your role to respond or take on. Right.
And there's a lot of people, like, because I'm really the main guy they deal with leading up to the fight, because I'm the guy hitting them up. Hey, where are your medicals? Hey, here's your transportation. Here's your flight schedule. I need your licensing. So they're used to talking to me because I'm the guy getting all that information from me. So they think, well, hey, let's just call Jason because he always answers us. And he's the guy I've been talking to. It's like, bro, you need to call your matchmakers and talk to him because that's got nothing to do with me. Because if there's a way to save it, they will. But our owner last fight, Rob Haydak, a guy came in basically one weight class above where he was supposed to be, the limit for the next weight class. And to the opponent's credit, he was willing to take the fight still up a weight class. And our owner said, no, we're not doing that. You're not going to get rewarded with a CFFC title fight coming in 10 pounds overweight. You're not doing it. Ridiculous. And I'm not letting another guy be in that position to where he's got to fight up a weight class when he made weight. And now
And then what does that do for the rest of the division too? That the rest of
yeah,
the division gets stuck in lull. You know what I mean? That was kind of like when Brandon Moreno and my guy Davison had to fight what 4 times in a row over a
right.
span of time and just held up 125. And then we don't get, Loner Kavanaugh. We barely get to see him during that time, like in the top level spots and guys like that. And the dude that's the champion now, Josh Van, who's got ridiculous talent. That's dude. I still doubt him for some reason, and that dude is so ridiculously talented. And those smaller guys too.
And that
They're
was a
coming
weight
up shooting
class that almost went away,
Yeah.
and I think we have one of the CFFC flyweight champ, we have one of the best in the country that I think is probably already a top 10. He's on Contender Series this year, and we have so much talent that way. But one thing about CFFC champs is you're not going to hold guys up long, because our champs don't defend very often.
Yeah.
Because once you become a CFFC world champion, you're immediately on the radar for the UFC, and you're going to get called up most likely.
Especially if you would win those fights like around now, like July-ish. Then you got Dana White Contender Series coming up right around the corner in the beginning of September. You know what I mean? Right around fall time. So
yep, our 125 champ Bilal Hassan, he's on Contender Series. Our 135, Sean Mora got called up he was on The Ultimate Fighter. Our 155 just got called up, signed a deal with PFL. Our 205 champ Luke Fernandez got into the UFC. Our 185 champ is on the Contender Series, Nick Galante. I mean, it's just our champs. You're lucky if you defend one time before you get called up, because they know that if you win our belt, you've had a tough road, and you're tested and you're ready. You are ready to go once you win a CFFC title.
The next time they might be working with you guys might be doing like, commentary or something like that, not actually fighting inside of the cage, because, but that's cool that you still have people come back and, guys like Michael Chiesa, who I know as a diehard fan, but even in the more reserved lane as a fan, people know from the, infamous incident on the bus, you know what I mean? And he was one of the people that were affected, but regardless of that, he's a name that everybody knows, and he's had a great career. And
absolutely.
You guys also have the stylistic guys that are just rip you limb to limb with the grappling too. Some of the grapplers that are produced out of CFFC, like specifically, are some of the scariest dudes in the lane. Like you talked about Marab, just the pace when I think Petr Yan's like arguably the best fighter in the entire world, pound for pound, and the rankings say that. But when he picked up Petr Yan and brought him over to Dana inside the cage, you know what I mean? That was just a whole nother world of talent. So
yeah, RBJJ stuff, and that's another partnership that we have with the UFC. It was funny, when we went to do our first show, we didn't have a TV deal. We were just going to do it because we wanted to try it. We wanted to see what it was going to do. And it got so much pop and so much social media impact that the UFC just called and said, we want this. Let's go ahead and stop playing around. We want to put this on Fight Pass.
Yeah. If so I could give my input real quickly to it, is because when you guys were kind of really like carving out, I think the simplisticness of CFFC was, the gold, like literally to the point where black and gold, nothing over the top. Like you see these crazy AI organizations where you see an organization trying to come up and they make these crazy AI images. And I don't even know if this is a real fight thing. Like who's going to be fighting on this card? Like the
GFL was doing that.
You guys instilled since day one, I think helped really grow. And then you had the talent to back it up as well.
What's been cool about it is again, we became partners with when we were first Fury Pro Grappling. And then we decided to rebrand and become CFFC BJJ. And we're now a feeder league to UFC BJJ. You talked about Kevin Dantzler. He got to go against Michi and go for their title. We've had a lot of people come from CFFC BJJ go on to UFC BJJ. We actually now on our main card, we emulated their style, their rules. We used to have our own rules, which was a sub only 1 period and then an overtime period where the first point wins, and then it would be a draw if it didn't happen. And now to make sure that people are prepared if they go to UFC BJJ is our main card athletes have to do the same thing. We do rounds and we score the rounds with judges. And that way, these guys, when they go to UFC, they're going to be prepared. That's what our biggest goal is to prepare these guys. And I talked on another podcast recently about a show we did a couple of years ago where, I'm the announcer for the UFC or for the CFFC BJJ. And I mean, we've had all these stars, UFC champions, UFC Hall of Famers that have come and competed for us on our BJJ tournaments. And here I am, as COO, an operations guy, and I'm getting to announce Cowboy Cerrone and Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas and Clay Guida and Joe Selecki and Cowboy Cerrone and all these guys that, as a local regional announcer, you'd never have the opportunity to do that.
And you
I'm
just
getting
like
to
span
announce
different
them.
generations too. You're bringing up Joe Selecki, and then the other side, Carlo Esparza. That's like spanning almost like 20 years of MMA.
And it was just such an amazing thing that I've gotten to introduce Chris Weidman, UFC champions, Aljamain Sterling, Marab, all these guys that are UFC champions and UFC Hall of Famers. And I'm like, I got to introduce them on a walkout where the only person that's introduced them for the past 10, 15 years is basically Bruce Buffer. That's it. Yeah. And now I'm a guy that got to do it. And so that's just been really cool about having a partnership with the UFC, is they're eager to let us use these guys and let them compete with us. And it's a real treat for people that get to go to the 2300 Arena in Philadelphia and be 15 feet away from legends and guys like that. If you go to a UFC in Vegas, you're not going to be within half mile of these guys. Yeah. And you're going to pay a ton of money to go see them. And ours, you're probably going to get to give them a fist bump and take a picture with them afterwards and see them in the crowd. It's just an experience that the fans absolutely love, and we love giving it to them.
Yeah, it's definitely more isolated too in that regard. And the craziest part is I've never been to an MMA event. I was actually supposed to work like 2 of them back to back, like a month or 2 ago, and I had some stuff come up, but I wasn't able to make it. But I'm still eager to scratch the itch and just go to an MMA event in person. I mean, like we talked about before, I had the luxury of growing up with a Super Bowl MVP quarterback as a close family friend. So I've been, to a lot of experiences like that, big time sports fan in that regard. But I feel like an MMA event hits completely different than any other thing. Even when I'm doing commentary for the #1 high school wrestling team in New Jersey and seeing guys like Killian Coluccio, top recruits in the country, guys like Grayson Pettit, who was on the Delsey wrestling team that won the state championship as like a 21 seed, but being up close and personal and calling fights and seeing, blood splattered all over the place and stuff like that is definitely a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, for us, it's really, I just got to get you to a show. Once I get somebody to a show, they're usually locked in and they never want to miss another event.
Yeah.
Once I get you to a live action show, you're like, wow, this is amazing. This is the funnest thing I've ever been to. Because again, we have everything down to a science, playing music in between rounds. As soon as a fight ends, music comes up, walkout songs, lighting, killing the lights before a guy walks out, blue lights when they walk out, red lights when they walk out.
I saw the MDW presentation, the behind the scenes. I watched the behind the scenes video on the reel, and I just wish that was like 15 minutes of like the entire thing, because that looks so sick.
We just did an outdoor show at Liberty Hill, our first outdoor show, which was the most stressful thing I think I've ever done in my career, because I could control a lot of stuff. I control what time you got to be there, what weight class you got to be, and all these things. One thing I couldn't control, none of us could control, and that was the weather. And that was so nerve-wracking, because up to a day before, it was showing that it could rain. And we've got to schedule everything out, from building a truss to getting the lights to getting the cage to getting all this hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment out there, that if it gets wet, it's destroyed. Yeah. So it's nerve-wracking to get stuff like that done. But, by the grace of God, it all worked out. And that was one of the craziest, most impressive events and shows that we've ever pulled off. That honestly, even the UFC, you see how much money the UFC had to put in building their outdoor show, and it got delayed because of rain, and they had to change things up. And luckily they were able to do their show, but it is a difficult thing to do.
For sure. And I would say, as for the UFC's perspective, out of everything that happened on the UFC White House card, the epitome of that Justin Gaethje walkout, looking at the Declaration of Independence, was probably one of the greatest moments in sports history, in American sports history, in my opinion.
And you look at, we had Kyle Dawkins on the card. We're really proud of him, how he made it. He was 9-0, 10-0, basically with CFFC, was our champion, got called up to the UFC. And again, he fought all tough guys. His losses are guys like Brandon Allen, Eric Anders. He had a no contest in there as well with guy, what's his damn name? Kevin Holland. Yeah. And
they clashed heads early in the fight.
He fought really tough guys. And he gets cut. And instead of tucking tail and saying it's over, he came back to CFFC. He won 4 or 5 in a row, got our world title back, defended against everybody, beat everybody up, and there was no denying him. And what happened? He was signed to fight for us again, and the UFC needed somebody on short notice. And what do? They came to CFFC and said, we see Kyle Dawkins. Now he's like 13-3, 13-4. Let's get him back. We got a short notice opportunity. What did he do? He won. And then he won again. And he got himself a spot on the White House card. And I got into it with a local wrestling coach here in Memphis. He had made a post, and it was more about his hate of Bo Nickel. But he was saying how Bo Nickel's been babied and hasn't been given a real fight. I'm like, do you realize how good Kyle Dawkins is? Kyle Dawkins is a BJJ black belt. Kyle Dawkins has killed everybody on the regional scene. Yeah. Kyle Dawkins has gone to decisions with some of the top 5 guys in the UFC. And
I don't know if people know how dangerous Michel Pereira is if he's not acting wild and is actually reserved in a way. And he just dusted him.
Yeah. Like, and how good he really is. So to me, that tells me how good Bo Nickel really is. Yeah. And I'm so proud. Like even this last weekend, I know we had a couple people on the card, Fatima Klein, who was actually a double champ for us. It was funny. She was fighting in Mississippi for us. And there was a girl coming from Mexico to fight her, and the girl fell asleep. And the people driving, when they got to the border, they said, hey, what are you guys coming in the country for? And not knowing what to say, they said, oh, she's fighting. And they looked her up and said, no, you can't come to the United States. You don't have a visa to do that. You can visit, but your visa doesn't cover that. So the girl got turned away at the border. So now Fatima Klein, who was fighting for our strawweight belt, didn't have an opponent. We found another girl from Mexico on like a day's notice. She drove up, and obviously they had to go up a weight class because the girl didn't have enough time to cut to strawweight in that short period of time, and fought Fatima Klein on a day's notice. So they're just wild stuff that happens in this business. But we saw Fatima Klein get in there, and she won. And that's what I just love seeing. I'm more interested now looking at UFC cards saying, who's a CFFC vet? Bang, 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 bang. And looking at those guys representing us and where they came from. And that's just makes you so proud to know that it may be a small part, but you were a part of their journey to get there.
For sure. And I think a great example of that too is Manny Morales, who kind of came up short recently, but of all the people that I've interviewed, like throughout every sport, when I was like listening to him talk, and it was actually the first time me and him conversed together, and we're like the same exact age, both from South Jersey. A lot of things equate up. I'm just not a savage in the regard like that with the hands. But when I was talking to him and the way that he talks about his career, I was just like kind of like flabbergasted. I was like, this kid, he's the same age as me, so I can feel comfortable saying this kid, but like this kid is going to be in the UFC one day, and he's going to be a top fighter. And nothing that happened this past weekend with him makes that deter any of those thoughts in my brain. And I just know, talking about some of the examples where he was out with Joe in Mexico and all that fiasco that happened with Joe's stomach getting hurt and this, that, the other. And he's a part of the team that has to deal with that. And then he gets a short notice fight with you guys. And he's like, yeah, I just got a short notice fight, and I just knocked this dude out in like 7 or 9 seconds. And
I'm 9 seconds, and not a scrub.
Like, what? Like,
he knocked out a very, very talented fighter.
That's what I'm saying. When I watch these, and then I watch those dudes, I'm like, dude, how is he doing it to this dude? That's like the first movement in the fight. There's like, positioning of feet 3 times, and then the dude's sleeping viciously. And then I'll watch these other dudes fight. I'm like, dude, this dude is beating up other people. Like, it's the circle of life. But like, a guy like Manny Morales and, some of the things that he's been able to do in his career. I know he's kind of, how serious he takes it. He might be down on himself a little bit, but I had him on the Cold on the Canvas podcast, and that dude is an absolute savage.
Well, I kind of talked to him too, and his mentality has changed a little bit, where he's like, this isn't a business. This is a fight. Yeah. I am here to beat somebody up and not let them take away what I want. Like you mentioned, he came up short this weekend, but he came up short against a guy that's probably UFC ready, that's extremely talented, and coming off a PFL win. This guy's tough. And that's the thing, is like, there are so many talented people out here that are, and we flew that guy in. I think I flew him in from Oregon or something like that, or Washington. So, I mean, we're bringing guys in from all over the country, sometimes even out of the world. We have a Japanese champion. We have Brazilian champions. We have champions.
They have Nazartine Ruzabayev, who's training out with Marquez MMA as well. They got dudes from all over. The ESO dude as well, who I can't pronounce his last name. So they got dudes from all over.
Yep.
So a guy like Manny, it's like, bro, it's one fight. This dude is really good as well. You go back on Monday or whenever you do Sunday morning, and you're training with top 5 170 pounder in the UFC, top 5, top 4 ranked, who just knocked out one of the greatest fighters of all time. It's like nothing to be
Yeah,
ashamed
that
of.
gym, I always try to stop by Marquez's gym and hang out a little bit when I come in. And you go to some gyms in other areas and they have like a guy on the cusp of the UFC or maybe a UFC guy and then some amateurs. Where you go to that Marquez MMA and there's 25 UFC ready, if not UFC guys in the gym working out at one time. You hear Sean Brady kick pads, it sounds like a baseball bat hitting a block of ice.
Yeah.
How a human can survive a kick from Sean Brady it blows my mind how hard that guy hits. And I'm seeing Joe Pyfer work his ass off. I've seen Manny work off. Ryan Cafaro,
Yeah.
Christian Bobby, Joey Milano. The list just literally goes on and on and on. You could take most amateurs out of that gym and they could be pro main events on almost any card in the United States because they're so tough. But I mean, the coaching staff there is amazing with John Marquez. Dean Thomas is up there. I don't know if you know Dean well.
I interviewed Coach Jonathan Webb, and he actually put me on to Manny, and that's how I got the Manny interview, because I asked him last thing before we leave the podcast who are some names I need to know, and he ran through a slew of his in connection fighters with what he does, but he told me specifically Manny. But I was telling him how I got into MMA was Dana White looking for a fight with Matt Serra and Dean Thomas when they would just go on the road. And I would just
so we actually did one of those episodes in Memphis with V3 Fights. It was really cool because like our main event, Joseph Lowry of CFFC guy, he beat Zach Fears and got onto the Contender Series. That's when they were still real heavy on the Contender Series. Bobby Moffitt got onto the Contender Series and got into the UFC. Tracy Cortez was on the card. Yeah. Buenos Soriano was on the card. So we had a lot of people on the card that ended up making the UFC, and there's some are still there now. So it was a really cool experience to get to do that. I didn't know Dean back then. I know him now really well. And he's got something in his brain that he can dissect and pick a fight apart better than pretty much anybody on the planet.
Yeah.
I've always said, if you're losing round 1 and Dean is in your corner and it goes to round 2, he will tell you the exact adjustments to make to win that fight. There was an example with Joe Pyfer was fighting, and it was a close first round. And I was like, if this gets out of the first round and Dean talks to Joe, it's over. And the second round afterwards, Joe finished the fight. Dean, that's why they bring Dean to the UFC, to do that really, really thorough analysis in between rounds, because I don't care, even if you have DC, whoever you have on there, they cannot break a fight down like Dean can. The science of it and exactly what needs to get done. And it's sometimes funny where they'll have Dean on during a round and he'll say, if this guy does exactly this, he'll win. And the dude does it exactly when he says it and wins the fight. And he's just like, okay.
That's why I was shaking my head like that, because I was going to say, when he pops in the second round, like in the inner time, I'm holding my breath because I'm like, bro, they can probably hear you and they're going to do exactly what you just said. And then it's going to be successful. And then the fight's going to end. And I'm trying to watch this fight for a little bit longer. So sometimes I know
he's amazing
because Dean Thomas is popping in. So
he'll do commentary for us on the MMA side, the BJJ side. I remember like a year or two ago, I'm looking in the crowd and the dude bought tickets to like sit in the general admission seats. I'm like, Dean, what the hell are you doing? Why didn't you just tell us you were coming? We'd have hooked you up. He's like, no, man, I'm here to support. That's the kind of character that guy is. Like,
I'm actually kind of mad at him. I don't even know him, because I try to follow him on social media, and he kind of has like a more reserved social media account that's, I guess, a little bit more personal. But I mean, if that's
his IG isn't, but I noticed he had things like where you couldn't tag him and stuff. You couldn't tag him in comments. But I think he's also trying to get a little better with his social media. Yeah. He does a lot of pretty funny
his influence on the fight game is just so underrated. It's literally,
and we've noticed it. He's been coming up and working in Philadelphia at Marquez's gym, and we've definitely noticed this huge transformation since he's been up there with like a really, really technical side and approach, where it's difficult to game plan during a fight. It's difficult to change a game plan or say, you know what, I'm noticing this. We need to do this to fix it. Man, Dean's on top of that stuff every single time he's watching a fight. He's almost a cheat code to have in a corner, to be honest.
Yeah, and we know how dangerous Izzy is, and I feel like the old Joe Pyfer, which is talented enough to knock out Izzy, he would have just stood there and banged with Izzy until someone was going to bed, and Izzy has already put out Poetan in one of the craziest knockouts ever. So it's like, that's not really that wise. And I feel like that Dean implementation is like, bro, get him on the ground, trap him, and he's not the greatest grappler. You're a better grappler with your resume, and then the fight's going to end because you can't take bopping shots from Joe Pyfer on the ground. You just can't do that.
Joe Pyfer, his talent is unbelievable. And I hate that he had to, early in his career, he fought a main event. So it was five rounds, and it sucks because he won the first 2 rounds. And if it had just been an undercard fight, he still would be undefeated. He
is that the Hermanson fight that you're referring to?
He would have won 29-28. But instead, I get it. It was a 5-round fight. That's extremely difficult to take. But he still had a good showing. He didn't get finished, and he's killed everybody ever since then. And I think if you give him that fight back, he wins it probably fairly easily. And he's a guy, man, he's already jumped up. I think he's like ranked six in the world right now at middleweight. He's big. He's young. He's extremely talented. He's extremely hardworking. And, that's a guy that I think is in the title picture with another win. And he's really, really there. And again, you'll never see a boring Joe Pyfer fight either.
No,
that guy's going out there to kill you.
He could make 205 and fight at 205 too.
Oh, he's a massive human being. When you see him walking around at 185, you're like, dude, I don't know how you make I don't know how you make 205 and you're making 185. So he's a big dude at that weight, and his talent level is through the roof. So I'm so excited to see what he's going to do in the UFC coming up.
Yeah, I just wished he would have been a part of like the UFC 330 plans in Philadelphia. That would have been a perfect, capping.
We were working on that a lot. We'd hoped a lot of guys like Pat Sabatini, Sean Brady, Joe Pyfer. I mean, we have so much talent out there. Unfortunately, just a lot of those didn't match up, or, it's a fight game. You can't, you can put stuff on paper, but they don't always work out with injuries or timing
I've also realized too, like for, maybe for the sake of Sean Brady, to see Islam fight Ian Gary makes more sense so that he has a clear way to getting back into that picture. You know what I mean? Because, we don't really see people awarded a 32-25 too often, you know what I mean, over a guy like Buckley. So that was a really impressive performance. You talked about diving back in the bag. I thought, I think it was the beginning of the second round, Sean almost hit the iconic spinning back fist that he hit back in the day too. That made him pretty popular. So
Sean's built such a fan base in Philly as well. Yeah, they love him. Like on one of our BJJ cards, he went against Craig Jones. Craig Jones, one of the greatest grapplers the world has ever seen. And guess what? Sean won. That was a match he was not supposed to win. He was just like, hey, I'll do it. And he wins it. And now he's going to wrestle Jordan Burroughs, one of the greatest wrestlers the world has ever seen. And people are like, oh, Sean's going to get killed. Well, they said the same thing against him with Sean Brady, with Craig Jones. And it didn't happen. Sean's more talented than you think. Sean is strong. Sean is talented. Yeah. Sean has grit. Sean has a lot going for him that he could surprise some people against Jordan.
Oh, for sure. And for me, somebody like me doing Delsey work, who Jordan Burroughs does Delsey work, like helps train some of the Delsey wrestlers. And then Sean is like, everybody around here idolizes him for the MMA stuff. That's like, the perfect setting for somebody like me and somebody like a lot of these guys in South Jersey to see that. That's like the pinnacle of what we would want to see. So shout out to RAF for putting that on as well.
Yeah, great events. We were doing the CFFC match day. We were doing college wrestling. We were having a lot of fun with it. And it was funny, like the first year we did it, we had a couple guys ended up being in the NCAA finals. The second year we did it, out of the 20 guys in the NCAA finals, 13 of them had competed on match day. Yeah. So we had a ton of guys. Shout out to Rob Eider, 1996 Olympian who lives out in the area. And he became our matchmaker. So he had connections, obviously, on the 96 team. He was on the team with Baumgartner and Kurt Angle and the Brands brothers and just a killer team that was one of the most dominant ever. So he had a lot of connections in the college world with a lot of those coaches and their respect, and got us some really, really cool matchups. We worked with Ben Askren and did a matchup there with Northern Iowa and Missouri. We had Iowa State on. We had Iowa. It was just such a cool experience to get to do that. It was pretty exhausting doing 30 events in a year with MMA, grappling, and college wrestling, but it was a great experience for us.
For sure. And that events like that too help the entire community, because mixed martial arts is mixed martial arts. So being able to put down a more condensed version that actually appeals to maybe more people. And there's also the people that are just, you're a high level wrestler. I had Miles Martin, who actually beat Bo Nickel for the national champion as a wrestler or as a freshman. He was actually my teammate growing up with football, and I'm pretty good friends with him. And he was talking about how the UFC and obviously a bunch of those guys, different fight teams, try to get him, like Kill Cliff, try to get him to fight, and he wanted no parts of it. But the appealing part is to like a high level wrestler like that that's seen it all. It's like, you want to come bring the family out if you have a family to come to this event, and then he tells their friend, they tell their friend, then whisper down the lane, and then bang, that blows up that, and then brings some people over also on top to fighting as well. So,
well, I think part of it is look at how many guys that are successful in the UFC are wrestlers. They're Division I wrestlers. Wrestling is the most successful combat sport that's been in the UFC. So it was kind of cool for the thing to say like, hey, this guy's fighting in the UFC now, and he has matches on CFFC match day. Let's go watch those college wrestling matches, which is cool. Yeah. And RAF is doing really cool things with getting some of these matchups that we would never get to see. Now you're going to see Colby and Bilal Muhammad wrestle each other. Do I think it's going to be a recipe for disaster? Potentially. I don't know how those guys aren't going to throw punches at each other and are going to actually wrestle a controlled match. It's going to be difficult, but we just saw Frankie Edgar and Clay Guida. We've seen all these guys get in there and wrestle that you would have never seen. And a lot of people hear about these guys wrestling, but they've never seen it. So now RAF is actually giving guys an opportunity to see wrestling, and they're putting on great events. And, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, MMA wrestling too is completely, entirely different than regular wrestling as well. Because when I first started doing play-by-play, I really didn't know isolated wrestling that well. I just know it from MMA and watching like 7 years and studying MMA and just being a freak of the fight pass. So I'm there with my broadcast partner, and I'm like calling out crucifixes. Like, bro, he's not going to hit him with elbows. Like, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? But it's just funny because I see like the escalated part to it, and then there's the reserve part. But the reserve part is I'm sitting there 10 feet away, and these dudes can crash into mine. And this is like the number 3 ranked guy in the state versus this guy, and they're going to wrestle each other again in, March for the state championship. And I'm watching the first installment of it in front of me, like 10 feet away. So I mean,
you don't get to pick who you're wrestling. It's you're going to wrestle who's in your bracket. And I'll tell you what, you take the toughest MMA gym in the world, it's got nothing on a Division I college wrestling room. The intensity of a Division I college wrestling room is the pinnacle of combat sports. It is the most intense, toughest thing that you'll ever go into. You don't see 40-year-old men start wrestling. You see 40-year-old men start doing jiujitsu because it's pretty easy on the body, and you can wear a gi and you can be pretty relaxed. Wrestlers, they're retiring at 28, 29 because that sport beats the hell out of you for 10, 15 years, and that's all your body can handle. So when you see guys like David Taylor in their 30s still winning world medals, Kyle Dake still on the world team winning medals, Jordan Burroughs, how long that he went out there, it's unbelievable. We saw Emiliano Lopez from Cuba win his 5th Olympic Greco-Roman heavyweight gold medal, which is absolutely unbelievable. It's one of the most impressive feats in sports. That's actually his 6th Olympic Games. So he didn't even medal at one of them, and a guy wins 5 Olympics after that. So it's pretty impressive, and that's why we're seeing the wrestlers come through with MMA for such success, because one, there's really no money in college wrestling. Now you have NIL, so some guys are getting some money. But other than that, there's no money in it. So you got to transition into, Gable Stevenson tried WWE, tried pro wrestling. We saw a guy like Kurt Angle, go into pro wrestling. Ken Shamrock's gone into pro wrestling. Dan Severin's done pro wrestling.
I think another perfect example too is Henry Cejudo, where he tried to make that comeback, and it kind of got split in a bad time. But we all know how high level of a wrestler he is and how high level of an MMA guy he was. But he kind of just missed that timeline from taking that time off when he retired.
Yep. That competing with wrestling, if you're not on it, it's a short window as well. You're not going to be able to stay out of wrestling.
And then you get Marab in front of you, MMA wrestling. You try to come back to MMA, and he's just taking you up and taking you down 21 times in a fight. Like, whether it's 15 or 25 minutes, and you're just like, dude, what am I doing? Like,
that's why, these wrestlers, they're if you want to compete, I suggest getting on your high school wrestling team and starting to wrestle and starting to do it, because it is a great sport. It'll make a man out of you like you've never believe. you know, we look at a lot of the females that are in the UFC. A lot of them have a wrestling background. They wrestled in high school. So there's opportunities now. And to be honest with you, I love that women wrestle because it saves opportunities for men as well because of Title IX. So every opportunity, every time a woman puts on a singlet, she's helping save wrestling. So if you're someone that doesn't support women wrestling, change that attitude, because women are legitimately saving the sport of wrestling by having college Division I programs now, and they're wrestling the Olympics, which I think actually saved wrestling in the Olympics for 2020. We might have been gone if women hadn't been involved. You know, Rob Eider, he was actually the women's coach. They won a world title in 1999. So embrace women doing it, embrace wrestling. And, you know, we really need those guys to get that combat base.
And also for the people too, to just extend that thought out, is like the people that are looking for another opportunity in wrestling, there's also women looking to wrestle. So why not become their head coach? If you're able to do that, you know, that opens up a spot, because a lot of these teams in high school, they're trying to have one coach both teams, because that's the only resource that they actually have.
Absolutely. And that's extremely difficult. And there are some states, like I have a buddy that coaches here, the same guy that was the matchmaker for V3. He coaches a girls team at a high school, and males are not allowed to practice with the girls, really. You know, I, as a coach, I can't even touch a girl when she's wrestling, where it's hard to demonstrate moves. So you need some male coaches so that you can demonstrate moves on the male coaches, so the girls can go back and try it out. And you know, we've got to make sure we're protecting women, and we're doing all that stuff for them. And it's a great opportunity, and it's gotten really exciting. Girls wrestling is really exciting. You know, I wrestled one girl in my entire career. She ended up being, I think, a 2004 Olympian. I wrestled her in the finals of a freestyle tournament. And I'd gone up a weight class, because freestyle, I didn't cut weight or anything. It's just basically what I weighed in that morning was what weight I wrestled at. And I'm like, man, she beat some tough dudes. So I'm like, man, I got to wrestle my first girl. I was like, man, I don't want to wrestle a girl. My coach is like, you're wrestling her, because if you pull out, what happens is you get points for yourself for the national team and stuff like that. But if you pull out of a tournament, you lose the points for that tournament. I'm like, all right, whatever. I wrestled, and I pinned her, whatever. It was almost a tech, or it would have been a tech if she got off her back. But she competed against men and boys all the time, and she ended up making an Olympic team because of it. So, you know, encourage girls. If girls want to wrestle against boys in open tournaments, stuff like that, support them and let them do it. It's not a bad thing, but I don't want boys wrestling against girls on the girls' teams. But let's let these girls get as much experience and training as possible to get them to be the best in the world.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Mackenzie Dern's holding the 155 UFC belt right now, and has, like, her father, I think, has an extremely extensive background in BJJ. So not only just wrestling too, BJJ is really good for women as well. And that's the path around here, like Web Fitness. They have a lot of girls competing on the Cagefury side and for the UFC BJJ.
Molly and Amanda and all those girls are all competing for us. I just actually saw Mackenzie at the IBJJF World Championships in May. The guy that I'm under, my lineage, Master Ricardo Laborio, he was getting an award. It was the 30-year anniversary of the first World Championships they had, and he was one of the first world champions there. Damn. So I went, and Mackenzie was there, and she didn't want special treatment. She wasn't sitting on the floor. She was sitting in the nosebleeds watching the finals. So she's won basically every jiu-jitsu level competition and world championship you could ever imagine, and now she's UFC champion. She transitioned that to become the UFC champion, and she's an extremely talented girl.
For sure. And I think Erin Blanchfield was she was the main event when the UFC came to Atlantic City a couple years back as well. I was trying to go to that card, but I mean, that just shows your main eventing. Like, even if it's a fight now, you never know with this sport and how crazy it is. So
another CFFC vet.
Yeah, there you go. So you just rattle them off, and there's probably a good chance that under the Venn diagram that they had some exposure to CFFC. So, but Jason, thank you so much for your time today, and great conversation that we had. And if you guys need any help over there at CFFC, I'm going to send my resume over and
absolutely
part of the equation. So.
Anybody watching, I appreciate you guys watching. Guys like this that do these kind of things, that give opportunities to people that wouldn't normally get to do it. You know, there's just like the UFC. We need guys doing podcasts and interviews on the regional level to help get these guys' stories out. If you really want to support guys in MMA at the regional level, man, get a ticket, buy their t-shirts, share their social media posts, do that kind of stuff so that when they do make it big, you can say, man, I knew you when you were just fighting at CFFC or whatever it was, but show them that support, be the shoulder to lean on when things maybe don't go their way, but be that guy. You know, there's always that talk. There was a world champion boxer one time. He said, man, every time I win, I'd come home and I'd have 100 messages on my answer machine. But when I lose, I wouldn't have one.
Yeah.
Nobody would contact me. Be that person that's in somebody's corner, regardless of the way win or lose, as long as they did what they were supposed to do, and support podcasts like this, because this gets guys views and helps them get to the next level. If I see a guy, he does a podcast like this and he gets thousands of views and hundreds of shares and all kinds of comments, that means he's on the radar. And that means people care about him. So these kind of things are important, and we appreciate everybody watching. Check it out as often as you can. He does all these different sports on this podcast. So we appreciate what you do, and I hope to see you at a CFFC show soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Jason. You wanted to plug up your podcast before you get out of here as well?
Oh, man, I do Control Chaos podcast. I don't have a set schedule for it. I do it live on YouTube, LinkedIn, my Facebook page. I try to have guests in the MMA space or political space, whatever it is, that have an interesting story so we can learn who they are. Just like this, I do all of mine live, so you can ask questions of these guys. Episode 1 was King Mo Lawal, former Strikeforce champion, NCAA Division I All-American, Greg Jackson, Eric Anders, Rob Eider. I've had a lot of cool people on, and I just continue to want to keep doing it. If you got time, check it out on YouTube or wherever, and I appreciate all your guys' support. Don't forget, CFFC is on UFC Fight Pass. Next show is August 7th, Hard Rock Casino, Cincinnati, Ohio. We're looking forward to it. Then we're back August 14th at the 2300 in Philadelphia. Then August 22nd with our Next Gen series at the 2300 Arena as well. So catch it all live.
Yes, sir. Got a packed slate for August, so I'll be,
We'll
watching. Hopefully, I can attend some of those events as well. So it'll be a good summer, a good end to the summer for CFFC. But thanks once again, Jason. I'll be in touch with you. So
thank you guys so much for watching. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.